Hello everyone. So welcome to session 22 of IS Baba's rapid revision series of 500 high probable topics for prelims 2020. I'm Pritham Reddy and I'll be dealing with 20 important topics in this session which are very crucial for prelims examination this year. So first important topic is new CRZ rules, that is new coastal regulation zone rules. So government recently notified this new CRZ rules with the stated objective of promoting sustainable development and also conserving coastal environment. So majorly you have to remember three important things in this particular new CRZ rules. So first is CRZ 3 category, that is dealing with the rural areas, is now divided into two separate categories. One CRZ 3A category and second one CRZ 3B categories. So now this CRZ 3 category which deals with the rural areas have been divided into two parts. So one, where densely populated rural areas, that is population density above 2161 per square kilometer as per the 2011 census, and category 3B, it deals with the rural areas with population density which is below 2161 per square kilometer. So next important, second important changes what you have to know is with respect to the no development zone. So no development zone of CRZ 3A category is now 50 meters from the high tide level as against the earlier 200 meters. So now it has been changed. However, the CRZ 3B category, so the no development zone has been extended to 200 meters from the high tide line. And third important thing what you have to remember is a new category, that is inland islands and backward category has been added. So the new rules have a no development zone of 20 meters for islands which are close to the mainland coast and also for all those backwater islands which are in the mainland. So next important topic, we'll understand basics of how this coastal regulation zones are divided into different classes. So CRZ is divided into four important classes, that is CRZ1, CRZ2, CRZ3 and CRZ4. So CRZ1, it includes area which are environmentally most critical. So you have to remember these are ecologically sensitive areas and these are very essential in maintaining the ecosystem of the coast. And under this CRZ1, we have CRZ1A and CRZ1B. So CRZ1A, it includes ecologically sensitive areas and the geomorphological features, whereas CRZ1B, it deals with the intertidal zone, that is the area between low tide line and high tide line. So second important category, that is CRZ2, it includes those developed land areas which are close to the shoreline and which are existing within the municipal limits or which is designated as urban areas. So CRZ2 deals with the urban areas. So next is CRZ3. So these are land areas that are relatively undisturbed, for example rural areas. And CRZ4 deals with the water area. So under CRZ4 we have two categories, that is CRZ4A and CRZ4B. So CRZ4A, where water area and the seabed area is between low tidal level up to the 12 nautical miles on the seaward side, whereas CRZ4B, this is water area and bed area which doesn't come under this CRZ4A category. So they usually extend from the mouth of the water body at the sea up to the influence of the tide. So finally you have to remember four important things in simple terms, that is CRZ1, they deal with environmentally most critical areas, that is ecologically sensitive areas, and category number 2, it deals with urban areas, and category 3 deals with rural areas, and category 4, they usually deal with aquatic area up to territorial limits. So next important topic is special cases and prohibited activities provided under CRZ 2019. So already we know what are the changes which have been done by CRZ 2019. So apart from those things, CRZ 2019 also included areas that require special consideration in the coastal regulation zone. That is, first one, critically vulnerable coastal areas. Second one, inland islands and backwater islands. And third one, coastal regulation zones falling within municipal limits of the Greater Mumbai. So next, one should know what activities are prohibited within the coastal regulation zone. See, some activities can be little bit confusing and tricky if it comes in the statement. So you should read and revise this particular list. Okay. So setting up of new industries is prohibited, as well as expansion of existing industries is also prohibited. So here it might be a little bit confusing. So manufacture or handling of oil, storage or disposal of hazardous substances is also prohibited, and setting up of new fish processing units also prohibited. Land reclamation, bunding or disturbing the natural course of the seawater, discharge of untreated waste and effluents from the industries or cities, dumping of city or town waste, port and harbour projects in high eroding stretches of the coast, and mining of sand, rocks and other substrata materials, dressing or altering of active sand dunes. So here also we might get confused. Disposal of plastic into coastal water shall be prohibited, and drawal of groundwater. Okay, so remember, these activities are prohibited within the CRZ. So next, we shall try to visualize whatever we learned now, because some things can be confusing, and we will compare CRZ notification 2018 to 19 with respect to the earlier CRZ notification 2011. So as you can see, under CRZ notification 2011, there were no separate categories under CRZ 1, 2, 3 or 4. However, in the new notification, there are separate categories under CRZ 1, 3 and 4. But the major important change is with respect to the no development zone. So earlier in 2011, no development zone extended up to 200 miles from high tide line towards the land in CRZ 3 area. So as you can see in the figure, CRZ 3 area, that is rural area, so there was no development zone which extended up to 200 meters from the high tide line. Okay. However, now in the recent notification, you can see that the CRZ 3 is divided into 3A and 3B, and the no development zone is just 50 meters. And even you can see here from both the figures that earlier in areas where CRZ 1, that is ecologically sensitive areas, no development was allowed. However, now you can see certain activities in this area. So they have relaxed certain development norms, and they are allowing activities like mangrove walks, tree huts, some ecotourism activities like nature trails, etc. in this ecologically sensitive areas, so which is bad. And you can see lot of developments which are taking place near the coastal areas. So you can see buildings here, you can see the road activity, right? You can see the road construction, port construction, and even the defense related construction. However, earlier the CRZ notification 2011 had prohibited all those things. So do read and revise about the new notification and know what activities are prohibited and what activities are allowed, because I am expecting a question on those lines. So next important topic will be comparing CRZ and IPZ, that is how is Island Protection Zone different from the Coastal Regulation Zone. So you might be knowing that Coastal Regulation Zone notification was first introduced in 1991, and it has since undergone several amendments. So CRZ, that is Coastal Regulation Zone, it was enacted in order to regulate activities within 500 meters of high tide line in coastal areas of Indian mainland, as well as those islands which covers Andaman and Nicobars as well as Lakshadweep. And also CRZ, it was aimed to strike a balance between local livelihoods and industrial or urban development. So you have to remember it. So we also know that under Environment Protection Act of 1986, so CRZ, it regulates activities to protect specific areas along the entire coastline of India. So earlier it was entire coastline. However, 2011 amendment IPZ, that is Island Protection Zone, was introduced in addition to the CRZ. So currently CRZ, that is Coastal Regulation Zone, it applies only to the mainland coast of India, while the IPCZ, that is Island Protection Zone. It applies only to the islands of Andaman and Nicobar and Lakshadweep. And you have to remember next important point that both CRZ and IPZ, they classify coastal areas into 4 regulation zones. But IPCZ notification, it additionally allows for smaller islands to be governed by a new framework called Island Level Management Plans or Integrated Island Management Plans. So you have to remember this. This is the main difference between CRZ and IPZ. And this Island Level Management Plans, they cover under its scope the regulation of activities carried out across the entire island and not just their coastal areas. So you have to remember that particular point. And compared to the coastal regulation zone, this island protection zone is more inclusive of traditional local human settlements and also the fishing activities. And IPZ also makes more provisions for tourism related infrastructure development on the islands. So next important topic is Island Protection Zone 2019 notification. So Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change, it has also notified the Island Protection Zone of 2019 for Andaman and Nicobar. So major changes are it allows ecotourism projects 20 meters from the high tide line in smaller islands, and it allows ecotourism projects 50 meters from the high tide line in larger ones. And this new notification, it allows for ecotourism activities like mangrove walks, tree huts, nature trails in Island Coastal Regulation Zone 1A. So IPZ 2019, it is allowing ecotourism activities in the most eco-sensitive region of the islands, which especially includes turtle nesting grounds, marshes, coral reefs, etc. Also, the notification allows for construction of roads, especially in exceptional cases for defense installations, public utilities or strategic purposes in eco-sensitive zones. So remember it. So the new 2019 notification, it relaxes development norms in the islands compared to the IPZ notification of 2011, which stipulated a no development zone of 200 meters from the high tide level for all islands. However, it is 20 meters and 50 meters now, considering smaller islands and larger islands respectively. So this brings the norms of Andaman and Nicobar at par with the coastal regulation zone norms for other islands which are in the mainland. And you have to remember, earlier only pipelines, transmission lines, trans-harbour links to be laid in the eco-sensitive zone were permitted. However, now road construction is also allowed. So next we'll deal with two important categories under IPZ, that is ICRZ and IAMPs. So earlier I discussed while dealing with the difference between CRZ and IPZ. So IPZ has one additional feature, that is IAMPs, that is Integrated Island Management Plans. So we'll see what all areas come under ICRZ and IAMPs. Also we will try to do Andaman and Nicobar mapping. So this IPZ is further categorized into two types, and both of which have varying restrictions on activities and industries to be set up. So under Island Coastal Regulation Zone, it comprises of Middle Andaman, North Andaman, South Andaman, Little Andaman, Greater Nicobar, Car Nicobar, Baratang, Havelock, Neil Island and Long Island. And under Integrated Islands Management Plan, it consists of all other islands of Andaman and Nicobar which doesn't come under this ICRZ, and also all islands of Lakshadweep, and also territorial waters of all Andaman, Nicobars and Lakshadweep islands. So let's do some mapping, because recently names were changed. Havelock Island was changed to Swaraj Deep, Neil Island was changed to Shahid Dweep, Ross Island was changed to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose Island. So do remember about these changes, and also know about where this 10-degree channel passes. So 10-degree channel, it divides Andaman from the Nicobar Islands. So next, try to know about some important islands, that is North Andaman, Middle Andaman, South Andaman and Little Andaman. And also there is Duncan Passage which divides South Andaman and Little Andaman. And also know important channels, that is Coco Channel and then Sombrero Channel and Great Channel. Also try to remember Narcondam Island and North Sentinel Island, which is important. So next important topic is National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management. So Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, it has set up this National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management in Chennai to undertake studies and research in the area of coastal zone management, including coastal resources and environment. So NCSCM is important this year because it was recently set up in 2019, and the major aims and objectives of the center are to strive for being a world-class knowledge institution related to coastal zones, environment, resources and processes, to promote integrated and sustainable management of the coastal and marine areas in India for the benefit and well-being of the traditional coastal and island communities. So it is trying to balance between the environment as well as the development of traditional people and coastal communities who are living in the island region. And also it advises the union and state governments and other associated stakeholders on policy and scientific matters which is related to integrated coastal zone management. Already we have covered integrated coastal zone management, a World Bank funded project. Okay. So recently Survey of India and National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management, they have mapped the hazard line for the entire coast of India. So which includes vulnerability mapping of flood, erosion and sea level rise. So the outputs will be used by all the coastal states and the UTs in managing coastal vulnerability in the coming years and as a tool for preparation of disaster management plans. So you have to remember that. And some key points what you have to have in mind is high tide zone or high tide line, low tide line, ecologically sensitive areas, critically vulnerable coastal areas. These all are demarcated by this National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management. And hazard line is demarcated by the Survey of India. And Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change is the nodal agency which is responsible for implementing the CRZ and the IPCZ rules. So do remember it. And it grants the final approval for plans and project clearances under the IPZ. And National Coastal Zone Management Authority is constituted by the Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change to oversee the implementation of CRZ and IPZ. So next important topic is Green Credit Scheme. So recently Forest Advisory Committee, it has approved the new scheme, that is Green Credit Scheme. So this scheme, it allows agencies like private companies and village community agencies to identify land and grow plantations. See why this scheme is important? Because currently under the Forest Conservation Act 1980, whenever a forest land is diverted for non-forest purposes like mining or industrial purposes, the project developer is supposed to identify land and he has to pay for planting forests. And also he has to pay the state forest department the current economic equivalent, that is called net present value of the forest land. So this money currently gets collected under the compensatory afforestation fund, and it's then the forest department responsibility to grow appropriate vegetation and to see that it grows into a forest. So industries have often complained that they find it very hard to acquire appropriate non-forest land, and also the compensatory afforestation fund is not utilized efficiently. So now this green credit scheme, which would encourage plantation by the private individuals outside the traditional forest area, so it helps to meet the international commitments and also helps to ease of doing business. At the same time, achieve sustainable development goals. Okay, so the private companies or the village community agencies, they identify land and they grow plantation, and forests are now traded as a commodity. So after 3 years, they would be eligible to be considered as compensatory forest land if they meet the forest department's criteria. So you have to remember about the scheme. So next important initiative, that is Green Good Deeds Initiative. So earlier in previous sessions, we already covered a central sector scheme called Environment Education Awareness and Training. So it had an objective to promote environmental awareness among all sections of the society and to mobilize people participation for conservation of environment. So on the similar lines, this Green Good Deeds Initiative, it is a societal movement which was launched by this Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So this particular Green Good Deed Initiative, it also aims to protect environment and to promote good living in the country. So this initiative, it urges people to perform at least one green good deed every day. Okay, so which includes like planting trees, saving energy, conserving water, use of public transport, and promoting carpool, etc. So this Green Good Deed initiative is about simple practical steps that a student or a teacher or citizen or aspirants like you can perform in their day-to-day life towards protection of environment. So it has found acceptance by the global community. So recently BRICS Ministerial on Environment, it has agreed to include Green Goods Deed in its official agenda. So next important topic is India's first emission trading scheme. So emission trading, it deals with making greenhouse gas emissions as a new commodity. So we saw under green credit scheme, forests were traded as a commodity. So under emission trading scheme, greenhouse gases emissions are traded as a new commodity. So it works on the concept of cap and trade. And during previous sessions, so we had discussed about UNFCCC and also Kyoto Protocol. So this emission trading, it was set out in Kyoto Protocol. So this allows countries that have emission units to spare, they can sell this excess capacity to the countries that are over their targets. So this is also called as carbon credits. So now what we have to remember is recently Gujarat has unveiled India's first emission trading scheme to curb air pollution. So under this scheme, the government has set a cap on emission and it allows industries to buy and sell permits to stay below the cap. So globally, the cap and trade system has been used to reduce other form of emissions such as sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide, especially in countries like US. However, Gujarat program is the first in the world to regulate particulate matter, that is to regulate particulate matter in the air. So which is single greatest threat to human health globally. So next important topic deals with sulfur emissions. So sulfur and sulfur emission was quite often in news for various reasons. So first one is sulfur is one of the major pollutants and it is emitted during the combustion of fossil fuels. And in India, several coal-fired power plants, they missed the revised deadline to install flue gas desulfurization units which are supposed to minimize the SO2 emissions. So you have to read and know about flue gas desulfurization technology. And also recently Greenpeace, it has released a report where it said India is the largest SO2 emitter in the world. And International Maritime Organization, it has set deadline that all countries should launch 0.5% global sulfur cap on fuel for ships. So till December 31, 2019, it allowed to use fuel with 3.5% sulfur. However, now it has set a deadline that sulfur level should be 0.5%. And sulfur reduction will also reduce particulate matter emissions, which is single largest threat to human health. And MARPOL, that is in short maritime pollution. So it is an international convention for the prevention of pollution from the ships. So even it has told that it will adhere to the IMO's deadline. And also you should know what is the sulfur content in BS4 and BS6 fuel norms. Okay. So next important topic is Global Alliance to Eliminate Lead Paint. So UNEP and World Health Organization, it has established the joint initiative, that is Global Alliance to Eliminate Lead Paint. So this lead paint alliance, it aims to prevent children's exposure to lead from paints and also to minimize occupational exposures to lead paints. So the broad objective of this lead paint alliance is to phase out the manufacture and sale of paints containing lead and eventually eliminate the risk from such paints. So the Lead Paint Alliance, it was formed in 2011 and it had set a target that by 2020 all countries should have in place national level regulatory framework to phase out the manufacture and sale of paints containing lead and eventually to eliminate the risk from such paints. So one should know about lead and also what are the sources of exposures of lead. So do read about sulfur cycle, and also do read about lead and its sources. Okay. So next important topic is Visionary Perspective Plan. So government has proposed this 10-year comprehensive plan for conservation of birds and their habitats. So simple question can be asked in prelims that Visionary Perspective Plan is associated with. So it is associated with conservation of birds and their habitats. So multiple measures will be taken in this long-term perspective plan, that is to curb illegal trade of birds and also have constant surveillance of avian disease. And do remember, India is third highest in bird trade globally, despite a complete ban on export of live birds. Okay, so this visionary perspective plan, it will be implemented by different stakeholders. However, this Salim Ali Center for Ornithology and Natural History will be the focal institution. So in our previous year question papers, we found a question on BHNS. So on similar lines, we can have a question regarding SACON. So do read about SACON. And the main objective of this VPP is to prepare a long-term perspective plan on priority areas for conservation of avian diversity, habitats and ecosystems, etc. So next topic is forest owlet. So this forest owlet is under extinction watch. So you can see in the figure, this forest owlet initially was like found throughout the Indian subcontinent. However, right now it is found only in the some areas of Gujarat. Okay. So this forest owlet, which is under the extinction watch, it is an endemic and endangered owlet of India, and though the forest owlet, it occupies the same geographical region, that is central India and northwestern Ghats, and share similar food habitats with the other owlets, that is spotted owlet, jungle owlet and little owlet. So this forest owlets have been narrowly distributed. So these forest owlets are generally found in teak dominated forests. And these critically endangered species of owlet is found in the shrinking forests of central India, and this forest owlet is listed as endangered on the IUCN Red List 2018 with a population which is estimated less than 1000 mature individuals. So the bird is diurnal. So one important unique aspect of this owl is they are diurnal, that is they are active both during day as well as during the twilight hours. So next important topic is Asian wild buffalo. So this Asian wild buffaloes or Asiatic wild buffalo, it is IUCN endangered, and their habitat is usually they are found in tall grasslands and riverine forests in central India, and they are found both in India and Nepal. So you have to know some important points because recently there were some proposals to translocate this Asian wildlife buffaloes. So you have to remember certain important protected areas with respect to this Asian wildlife buffalo. That is Manas National Park in Assam, Udanti Wildlife Sanctuary which is in Chhattisgarh. And this this wild buffalo is Chhattisgarh's state animal, and this is part of Central India Wild Buffalo Recovery Project. So you have to read about Central India Wild Buffalo Recovery Project. And remember Indravati National Park, Pamed and Udanti Wildlife Sanctuaries in Chhattisgarh, they have some population of Asian wildlife buffalo. So next important topic is Asiatic lion and conservation of Gir lions. Recently, lions were in news because around 23 lions died in Gujarat's Gir forest. And central government and Gujarat, it has announced around 97.85 crore Asiatic lion conservation project. Okay, so these Asiatic lions are endangered, and lion is one of the 5 pantherine cats inhabiting India along with Bengal tiger, leopard, snow leopard, clouded leopards. So it was also known as Indian lion and Persian lion. So Gujarat government, it has envisaged a greater Gir that includes Gir National Park and sanctuaries in Girnar, Pania and Mitiala. And also do remember there were also proposals to reintroduce this particular lions in Kuno Palpur Wildlife Sanctuary in Madhya Pradesh. So this Kuno Palpur Wildlife Sanctuary in Madhya Pradesh was identified to be the most suitable for reintroducing this particular species. So next important topic. So in news it was provided there are plans to introduce African cheetah from Namibia. So in 2012 the plan to introduce African cheetahs in Palpur Kuno Sanctuary in Madhya Pradesh was stalled by the court. However, now there are again plans to reintroduce this African cheetahs from Namibia. So remember, cheetah is the fastest land animal and it has been classified as endangered by the IUCN, and it is listed under Appendix 1 of CITES. So its habitat is mostly arid habitats like dry forests and scrub forests and savannas. Okay. And next important topic is first elephant colony. So first elephant colony came in Bandhavgarh National Park. So Bandhavgarh forest gets its first elephant colony, and this Bandhavgarh National Park is spread at Vindhya Hills in Madhya Pradesh. So you have to remember these protected area names like Bandhavgarh, Palpur Kuno Sanctuary, and then Udanti Wildlife Sanctuary and associated states. Okay. So this Bandhavgarh National Park, it is spread at the Vindhya Hills in Madhya Pradesh, and it is known for the Royal Bengal tigers. So it is both national park as well as tiger reserve. So density of the tiger population at Bandhavgarh is the highest known in the India. So you have to remember this. And this Bandhavgarh, it has mixed vegetation ranging from tall grasslands to thick sal forests. So in 2019 census, Madhya Pradesh state recorded the most number of estimated tigers. So earlier it was Karnataka, now it is Madhya Pradesh. And there are 6 tiger reserves in Madhya Pradesh, that is Kana, Bandhavgarh, Panna, Satpura and Sanjay Dubri and Pench. Try to remember these 6 tiger reserves in Madhya Pradesh. So next important topic is Asian Elephant Alliance. So this Asian Elephant Alliance, it aims to secure 96 out of 101 existing corridors used by elephants across 12 states in India. So the joint venture is aimed at raising around 187.16 crore to secure 96 remaining elephant corridors, old and new, in the next 10 years. So Asian Elephant Alliance is an umbrella between 5 NGOs, that is Elephant Family, International Fund for Animal Welfare, IUCN Netherlands, Wildlife Trust of India and World Land Trust. So next important topic is WWF program, that is TX2. That is India along with 12 other tiger range countries have committed to doubling the population of tigers. That's the reason TX2, that is to double the tigers population in their respective countries by 2022 as part of this WWF program TX2. So India already completed its TX2 target 4 years earlier. So India, with its 50 tiger reserves in 18 states, has over 80% of the global tiger population. And International Tiger Day is celebrated on 29 July annually to raise the awareness about the tiger conservation. So there were some questions like M stripes, so we can expect a question TX2 is associated with. So Tiger Conservation Program. So these are the 20 important topics. So let's meet with another 20 important topics in next session. Thank you.